You're listening to the Unsure Entrepreneur Podcast with Roger Pierce. Whether you're scribbling business ideas on a napkin or wrestling with the should I, shouldn't I question, get ready to explore the realities, the risks, and the rewards of entrepreneurship as we share the stories, scars, and successes of small business owners.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Unsure Entrepreneur. I'm Roger Pierce. Thanks for being here today. Excited to have our next guest with us today. We're going to talk about AI, the productivity gap for Canadian businesses, and some small business opportunities. So let me get right to it and welcome our guest. Patrick Gill is the Senior Director of Operations at the Business Data Lab at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. As a career-long innovator and entrepreneur, Patrick has founded 5 multi-million-dollar projects designed to help Canadian businesses compete and prosper. Now, among these projects, Patrick co-founded the Canadian Chamber's Business Data Lab to democratize business data for decision-making and to advance the country's understanding of Canadian business conditions and trends. Now, Patrick's work experience has firmly established him as a thought leader, often featured in media and think tank publications. Recently, Patrick authored a report on business adoption and use of generative AI, Gen AI, called Prompting Productivity. Patrick holds a master's degree in public policy and an advanced certificate in public administration and governance. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks for having me, Roger.
So looking forward to our chat tonight. I know you're going to be a wealth of information on this subject for small business owners. So let's dive right in. In your excellent report, Prompting Productivity, which I'm going to post under the resources section on unsureentrepreneur.com for any listeners who want to go and download it, you talk about concerns over Canada's low productivity. Can you explain for us what is the productivity gap and why we need to pay more attention to this?
Yeah, no, of course. Well, Canada can add another economic crisis to its ongoing list, declining productivity levels. And over the past decade, productivity has increased by less than 1% annually, placing Canada second last as the most productive country in the G7. So such factors as weak competition within sectors, underutilization of highly skilled workforce, and the prevalence of small and less productive businesses, as well as insufficient investment in research and equipment, have all contributed to this alarming trend. This situation has grown so acute that the Bank of Canada has actually bequeathed it the undesirable title in an emergency. So boosting our productivity is not just an economic imperative, it's a societal one. Inefficient production means lower wages, less tax revenue for essential public services, and fewer future jobs. Low productivity imperils every Canadian's standard of living.
Wow, you're right. When I saw that emergency status, boy, that's a big label, one we all need to pay attention to. And it's such a great report and so easy to read. And again, I encourage people to go and download it and take a deeper dive. Now, Patrick, in this episode, we're going to talk a lot about AI. I'm no expert. I know you are. For people new to the subject, can you define the difference between generative AI and AI?
Sure. So artificial intelligence is simply computer software and programming intended to that can mimic human abilities. And when it comes to generative AI, that is a subset of artificial intelligence, which sort of the development of artificial intelligence has been growing over the last 60 years. Now, Gen AI or generative artificial intelligence is what we mean by that is sort of these very large language models that have been trained on vast amounts of data. Think about the entire internet of data. So it's these large models that have learned based on vast amounts of data, basically the internet, and the applications that sit on top of these large language models. You know, these are the chatbots, ChatGPT, if you will, that help users interact with these models in their own language.
Now, I'm a subscriber to Chat GPT 4.0, I guess it's called now. And I'm finding it boosting productivity 50% or more, at least, including a lot of the prep work around posting this podcast. You know, and my main business is content creation for large brands and banks. So it comes in very handy for content creation. I could speak to that. What are some of the other popular generative AI apps out there? I know Microsoft has got one. There's others, right?
There's a whole bunch. The most sort of well-known Gen AI tool or chatbot based on public opinion research that I've seen from Ipsos certainly is ChatGPT. This is really when Gen AI grabbed the world's attention when the first iteration was released in November of 2022. And since their awareness and interest in AI, Gen AI has just exploded with everyone trying to catch up. So, generative artificial intelligence is a generational opportunity to boost Canadian productivity. By automating laborious and low value tasks, Gen AI allows workers to focus on higher value activities, thus making work more productive at little to no cost.
Wow. So really, in the report, you're talking about the problem, productivity, and low AI adoption, but also the solutions, right? We've got potential to turn things around by getting more into AI. And I know you've got some stats and things we're going to quote on that. Something from the report that jumped out at me was a quote from the chamber. It says, "Something needs to change. That is why the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is putting focus on Gen AI as a potential catalyst of productivity growth." You guys are taking this seriously.
Well, bankers don't like to be alarmists, but when the Bank of Canada comes out with a title of, we're in an emergency situation because of low productivity. Because of low productivity, our standard of living is falling behind the US and our other economic peers. This is a critical issue for Canada's future prosperity and how you and I and our families have opportunities to prosper in the future. And so we've been heading in the wrong direction for a long time. And here's a new technology that we absolutely should be testing and embracing because it can give us superpowers. It can sort of double our output. It can replicate Roger to do a number of tasks, allowing you to focus on some really important things. And the primary uses of Gen AI by business users today, it's really to accelerate the production and quality of the goods and services that they produce. That's the main focus, and they're doing this to speed up the processes, improve the quality of their outputs, save some money as well. We're operating in a very high cost environment with high inflationary pressures and rising interest rates over the last couple of years. And so a number of businesses, at least the earlier adopters, which is about 1 in 7 businesses, are looking at this to compete more, be more productive, be more efficient with their resources and their staff.
Wow. And the report does talk about a lot of the benefits possible from AI. But before we get into that, I want you to dig a little deeper with me here on the fears. In the report, you talk a lot about some of the perceptions or misperceptions of AI, and a lot of people think it's going to replace the workers. It's not the case so much, is it? I mean, it's an opportunity for us to tackle new markets. I mean, exporters are using AI quite a lot. I see that in the report. Small businesses are lagging behind. I want to get your input on that. But what are some of the reasons in your findings, Patrick, why people are so reluctant?
Global interest in AI is quite high, and that interest is being sustained. So when we look back before sort of chat GPTs of the world came out, when we look at sort of those more historic uses of AI by business, so think of traditional machine learning and whatnot, Canada was sort of mid-pack among sort of OECD countries. So we're in the middle. We're using it, but we're not the leaders. And when it comes to Gen AI today, what we know is that everyone's searching. They're going on to Google, they're searching up ChatGPT, AI, and it's not just Canadians, it's the world. And so the world is probably going to be moving a little bit faster. And there's a probably a great correlation here with sort of the public trust when it comes to AI. So public trust and perception in AI definitely will play a crucial role in widespread adoption. Again, sort of the public opinion research I've seen so far. So there are recent global Ipsos surveys that show Canadians are more nervous about AI compared to other countries, with only 38% of Canadians viewing AI positively. Perhaps one of the findings from our report, which basically leverages StatCan data, will help assuage the nervousness of Canadians that the technology is primarily going to be used to augment workers' capabilities, not to replace workers entirely. In fact, the data shows that only 13% of the 14% of businesses that are early adopters of AI are looking to sort of automate tasks to replace workers. So this is primarily how can businesses help their existing workforce fill the skills gap, which we know that they have. About 42% of businesses last year reported that their workforce have some sort of skills gap that they currently have. So how can this technology be that bridge to the skills gap? And again, help them to be more productive and streamline their operations for their clients.
Wow. And I think that's right to the heart of it. People are worried about, the Terminator movies happening, and all of a sudden we're run by the robots taking away all of our work. I have this conversation a lot with one of my clients, a longstanding client, a large software company, accounting software company, and they're really getting up there and telling their clients, look, the AI applications on our software help reduce laborious, repeat manual tasks and free up the accountants that they sell to do more strategic work, right? So by freeing up things like data entry and checking for mistakes and scanning this and spreadsheets, God, accountants hate the spreadsheets. It really is freeing them up. It's not replacing workers, it's giving them opportunities to do more of what they love.
The new Stackhand data reinforces that as well, that the driving force behind Gen AI adoption is to accelerate the production and quality of work. And you know what? Again, if we look at global public opinion research, more people think AI will change how they do their current job versus replace it. So I think it's the Ipsos poll is 57% of global respondents think AI will likely change how they perform their current job in the next 5 years, and only 36% of global respondents across 31 different countries worry that AI will replace their jobs. So there's a bit of a demographic divide here, whereby, unsurprisingly, you have younger generations much more interested in trying these tools, seeing the value of these tools than older generations. I think Generation Z, so those between the ages of 18 and 27, are 3 times more likely to have already tried ChatGPT than individuals over the age of 55.
Oh, so you're saying an old guy like me is actually on the innovative side?
You're an innovator, Roger. Well, you do have a podcast about sort of innovation and business trends. So, yes, absolutely.
Thank you for the positive affirmation. I appreciate it. Let's talk more about who is using it. I think this is a fascinating part of your report. The sectors using Gen AI right now, if I can recap, it's tech-heavy industries like professional services, information services companies, finance, insurance. On the other end of the scale, the lowest adoption rate is among construction. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we see is that these early adopters, these early innovators, 1 in 7 businesses or 14% of Canadian businesses, every sector in every region of the country, there is a business that is experimenting with AI. And yes, early adopters of Gen AI tend to be larger businesses, they tend to be exporters, they tend to be industries with sort of highly concentrated workforces of highly educated workers. So think financial services, professional services. Yeah, of course, information and technology. Within these type of industries, their main focus is to accelerate content creation, to accelerate the production of their goods and services, find cost efficiencies and whatnot. Some other interesting results that we're seeing is that industries that are data rich, so resource companies, mining companies, financial service companies, for example, they're using the technology to do even better data mining of their of the data that they have. And then when you look at sort of customer focused B2C versus B2B companies, it's really the B2C companies that are latching on first to try to enhance the quality of their goods and services to their customers before B2B. When it comes to exporters, I should say, I mean this should be not really surprising. Exporters traditionally are much more innovative and productive than non-exporters. This is because with exporters out in the world, they're exposed to sort of best practices in other markets, and so as I mentioned before, there's global interest in the use of AI and different AI tools. And exporters being in different markets in Asia or Europe, they see this interest. They have to remain competitive. And so they're going to be a little earlier on to some of the new and positive trends that they're seeing, again, to remain competitive.
Excellent insight. Excellent insight. It's such a great report, And I also read too that despite being kind of an AI hub, Quebec, Ontario is leading the charge. Is that right?
That's right. So, looking on a regional basis right across Canada, Ontario is leading the charge. And it was kind of surprising that sort of the regions that had the highest concentration of sort of academic and think tank bodies doing research in this work didn't really have a huge positive impact on sort of adoption. So, places like Kitchener-Waterloo, Edmonton, and Montreal, where Canada's AI supercluster is actually based, that didn't have as big of an impact as sort of the makeup of industries in different parts of the country. So if there's a part of Canada that has a high concentration of exporters or large businesses, and large businesses specifically in those top three of information, professional services, and financial services, they're likely to be leading the way on adoption as we see now.
Okay, larger businesses over small businesses. And I'm glad you brought that up because as a small business show, we should talk about the opportunities for small businesses and startups. And for people who don't know, I'm going to quote our friends at Stats Canada to define a small business. Small businesses are the major contributors to Canadian economy. And according to Stats Canada, businesses with 1 to 9 employees comprise 98% of all employer businesses in Canada and employ just under 11 million people, which is 2/3 of all employees. 2/3. By comparison, slightly larger businesses or mid-sized businesses with 100 to 500 employees employ 3.6 million individuals, which is 21%. And large businesses with more than 500 employees, the banks, the insurers, like you mentioned, they employ 2.7 million individuals. So my point is, it's plain to see how smaller businesses play an important role in driving Canada's economy and, as to your point, hopefully closing that productivity gap. So let's talk about some of the roles and opportunities specifically for small business. I know we talked a bit about this before our conversation here today. Some of the opportunities for small business, and I've written them down here just to recap, include things like obviously content creation, improving client or customer experience, increasing automation in tasks without reducing employment, spurring data-driven decision making, and minimizing workforce recruitment and retention challenges. And these are all over the sector spectrum for small businesses, can be service businesses, construction, doesn't matter what you're in. There are opportunities for small business. So can you expand on that a bit and maybe touch upon some of the things that small businesses can be looking to do with AI?
Yeah, of course. And let me start off by sort of painting you a slightly more nuanced portrait of small business in Canada. And so, in fact, when you point out that small business is traditionally defined as between 1 and 99 employees, that's a big spectrum. And so, we did some research to better understand who is small business. And the reality is, small business in Canada is actually much smaller than you may think. So, even though that 98% of businesses in Canada are between 1 and 99, 57% of that 98 are actually micro businesses. So they employ between 1 and 4 employees. So small business in Canada is really small. And, sort of the most prevalent type of businesses in that area, construction, professional services, retail, and whatnot. And so these are very small groups, small teams. And I've never met a small business owner or an entrepreneur that wasn't run off their feet or wearing multiple hats trying to do things. And so this is sort of the great advantage of sort of tools like generative artificial intelligence. It can give you superpowers. It can literally replicate yourself at little to no cost. When you look at sort of the historic barriers for businesses on tech adoption, small businesses actually have fewer challenges historically to incorporating technologies into their operations than large businesses. Large businesses have to worry more about sort of privacy and security of adding something else into their systems, or how does a technology stack on the existing stack of technology solutions that they have. Also, retraining staff can be and sort of change management can be a huge hurdle for large businesses. Smaller businesses, smaller teams don't have to worry about that. Traditionally, the biggest obstacle for tech adoption or incorporation for them is just, do I have the resources to invest in something in this time, right? And the time to do so. And so the great thing about this type of new technology is that it really overcomes that traditional barrier for micro businesses, small businesses, in respect to resources, because there are so many open source or free tools available to those small business owners and their teams that can be used immediately. They just have to try. And I'm a big proponent of nudge theory. And the hope with this report, getting out the message of who's using it, my hope and who's using it globally is that Canadian businesses will start to be afraid. They'll be afraid that they'll be left behind, that they'll see their competitors in their own backyard or in other countries experimenting a little bit more, producing their goods and services faster and better a little bit differently. And so hopefully that nudges them into testing this tool out. Again, you could start with, what if you got better at writing emails, those sales messages, or you want to up your social media content. But again, you don't have time. Maybe you're not a social media expert. A tool like this can be an expert for you because it's been trained on the knowledge of the internet and everything that's currently available out there. It is the expert. You just sort of have to play around and tap it in, knowing that so many small businesses are small and their productivity has actually been a real challenge for themselves, but also the country historically. You really should give it a try. And you could tap one of your younger workers to help you experiment it if this is a greater challenge, if you're a more mature business owner yourself.
Excellent points. And I'm so glad you pointed out the smallest of small businesses, micro businesses. That's the bulk of us. And it doesn't take much. We're very nimble. We can try these things out. Chat GPT has a free version. The other offerings, there's free versions as well. It doesn't have to cost a lot.
Bing is free. Microsoft Bing, you can go on. Maybe not everyone has been using Bing recently, but instead of Google, but you can go onto Bing, and Google should be out in the near future. There is a chatbot right there that's leveraging the same large language model that ChatGPT leverages for its chatbot. So that's free, that's publicly available. And the nice thing about the Bing option is that it overcomes some privacy and security issues as well, because it doesn't remember what you put in there. It goes in, it's not being trained, it doesn't add to the training content, and once you're done it forgets, but you've gotten the answer that you needed to.
All these great options. It's surprising to me that, as you said, only 15% of small businesses are currently using Gen A. I guess people need to hear more about it from this podcast. You made a very specific example of what someone can use. I think that's what we need to start with. What can I do in my daily routine as a small business owner? Write better sales emails, as you said. Automate some content. Use it to organize social media.
Create visuals for your ads, create contents for your ads, create a calendar for your ads. It can be sort of your own professional marketing team right there. I actually have my own chatbot, which helps me be a better business coach. So it's a business coach, and it helps me sort of work through different options for my team. Hey, if you're not an economist or a data scientist, but you want to get a better understanding of the data within your business, or available out there, it can do this too. You can feed it numbers, and it'll help explore those insights for you. Again, with a click of a button or a simple prompt.
You make a good point. It's not just about written content, it's visual content, it's data analysis. Give it a try.
Give it a try. Yeah.
You mentioned chatbots. What was I going to say? Examples you gave are great for, boosting productivity of an existing business, writing sales emails, etc. And I'm excited about that. And I encourage business owners just to give it a whirl. What about the flip side? What are the business opportunities for, say, a startup, someone who's just at the gate thinking about getting into a business, and they go, can I build an AI-based business and sell services? What are your thoughts?
Yes, and we do see that emerging enterprises, startups, so businesses that are 1 to I think 11 years of age, they're using this a little bit more than mature businesses. And for us, sort of the interpretation of the data is that startups and large businesses both are sort of taking an innovate or perish approach. With startups, they're trying to sort of escape competitiveness velocity. They're trying to compete. with the other players in the market, and they see this as a competitive advantage. And large businesses, they're continuing to try to innovate to remain relevant, or else fear that they'll be taken over by a startup just coming out today.
Excellent points. And I'm going to go back to something I pulled from your report about the return on investment, because, we got to watch the money. You say here, from a business perspective, Microsoft indicates the average return on investment for companies using AI is $3.50 for every $1 invested. It's a no-brainer, right?
That's a no-brainer. And, that is a global stat looking at sort of global usage, probably more by large businesses. But again, you don't have to spend any money. You just have to direct yourself or your staff to take some time and to experiment. What is the return on investment for the country, which is really important? So when we took a look at how much could use of Gen AI by Canadian businesses help to boost Canadian productivity, and whether it's adopted slower or faster, Gen AI could essentially boost Canadian productivity by between 1% to 6%, up to 6% over the next decade. And that in turn, of course, will raise our standard of livings.
We all win. And we've got to do it, right? We've got to get there, pull together and make it happen. And I'm going to get to what's happening in the future in our closing section here, but back to why small businesses are holding back. And I know one of the issues you raised in the report is finding workers with AI skills is a challenge, especially for small businesses who maybe can't afford the top talent, followed by financing. But let's just focus on skills. What's happening there? Is there any government programs or training assistance or anything happening that can help a small business owner find these people?
Yeah, there are lots of existing programs at all levels to support businesses in the adoption of technology, not just generative artificial intelligence, but if they want support with cybersecurity or cloud computing, being able to engage employees and customers in a hybrid digital format. That's all currently available. So the financing is there. And really, when we were looking at skills, it was just acknowledging that businesses today continue to indicate that they have difficulty finding employees with the skills that they need. And with the employees that they currently have, last year, 42% of businesses indicate there was some sort of skills gap within their workforce. And so here's a way you can partner your staff and elevate their skills by giving them a tool that again is very skillful because it has the skills of the internet. All that needs to be done again is just experimenting. You find a couple of small wins. You measure that to see how much uplift those small wins had, what was the return on investment, and if it makes sense and it works, replicate it, scale it up, try it with a different part of the business. You don't have to implement everywhere, but just try adding it to one small piece of what you're doing and see if it improves things. I bet it will.
Absolutely. Like you said, try it on a sales email or get it to write an article for your blog post, something simple, and see how much time that saves the employee who usually does that. It frees them up for other stuff.
Here's another option. Maybe you're not actually marketing your services to a French Quebec market. Again, you can take your existing materials and immediately it can be very well translated.
That's an excellent point. A lot of us are woefully behind in offering the French language option. So AI can take care of that for us.
AI can do simultaneous translation of blogs or make sure when you're looking at the camera that your eyes are looking at the camera.
And for our American listeners, it can also help with Spanish too, I believe.
Yes, that's exactly it. It can open you up to new markets. Absolutely.
That's a great point. Great point. Oh my gosh. Well, I could talk to you all day, Patrick, but watching the clock here, I want to get to some closing remarks and look at the future. Would you talk about this in the report? The language you use at the recommendations section is innovate or die, which is pretty stern warning. What are your key recommendations to Canadian businesses?
I do hope Canadian businesses take note that the world is interested in Gen AI, that Canadian businesses themselves are falling behind and need to be cautious. They need to guard against becoming uncompetitive domestically, internationally, and they really need to try to innovate a little bit more. And here's something that overcomes historic sort of challenges with innovation, costs, bandwidth. All they have to do is simply try things out. I hope they see that their competitors are doing it because this technology is being used by everyone, everywhere, of all size. We're projecting that use of this technology will reach a tipping point in the next 3 to 6 years. So don't be a late adopter of this technology because it could have big ramifications for you, and certainly will have ramifications for the country writ large. So test something, experiment. It's okay to experiment. Measure that experiment, replicate that experiment, and scale it out. And of course, there are programs, lots of programs, right across the country at all levels that can help you to experiment with this technology. If you need additional staff, if you need additional funding, but again, those historic barriers are not as great when it comes to this particular technology.
Terrific insight. Thank you. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Just from a policymaker perspective, I really hope that government itself could become more efficient and focused on delivering better services to their citizens. And so I think it would go far by enhancing public trust if the government also leads by example, and it can show Canadians in their daily life how this type of technology is improving the customer service to Canadian citizens, and sort of showing trust in that regard. The other way, government can of course support with upskilling Canadians as well, and through our existing educational institutions and programs. That's probably the biggest thing that government can do to help support the adoption of this technology and writ large is upskilling Canadians so that they feel more confident in their abilities to be able to utilize and benefit from technologies like this.
Policymakers and government folks listening, here's some great suggestions. Are you referring to something like you talk about Singapore's Go Digital program, doing something like that?
Yeah. So again, places around the world see the value in this technology, and they have programs to support it. Singapore has a number of programs to upskill workers, but they also have programs to support digital adoption by businesses. And so we have those as well, sort of created and expanded upon during the pandemic to help businesses that were sort of hibernating their operations by helping them go online, maybe for the first time, or improving their website. Those programs still exist, perhaps haven't been fully tapped as much as they could by Canadian businesses. So do take a look. Maybe use GenAI to give you a summary of all the different programs available. And you know what? It could probably help you fill out an application, because I know that that's never easy as well.
Use AI to get more AI support. I love it. Great stuff. You know what? And thank you so much, Patrick, for being here today. And thanks to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce for taking a lead in all of this. Reminder, folks, to go and download the Prompting Productivity Report found under the resources page on the website unsureentrepreneur.com. And unfortunately, Patrick, that's all the time we have. But I want to thank you very much for sharing your insights and expertise with us here today. It means a lot to me and the listeners. Thank you very much.
Roger, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Now, before you go, if someone wants to connect, what's the best way to get in touch?
Best way to get in touch is reach out on LinkedIn.
Go to Patrick Gill at LinkedIn and find you from there. That's terrific. Well, once again, thanks again, Patrick. And to our listeners, thank you for being here. And be sure to return next episode for more insights from the Unsure Entrepreneur podcast. That's it for now. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the Unsure Entrepreneur podcast. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss other candid conversations with small business owners. And be sure to check us out at unsureentrepreneur.com.